Okay, once again I'm sorry to say I have to offer an apology for my faulty memory. After all, it's been years since I've read through this entire series from the very beginning, and so when I was thinking of a 3-part story here, I was most likely thinking of the Knuckles backup story. And going back to this issue, I remember exactly why I didn't remember this story very well. It's another filler that feels like something that should have been done back in the single digits, to the point where this is probably going to be a very short review because this is such a nothing story that I really can't be arsed to go into depth with something that doesn't have depth to begin with. Even the cover is relatively underwhelming here, with a very generic pose for Sonic, with the 3 masks of the ancient walkers in the background with a generic sunburst in the back. Not nearly as impressive or dynamic as what has come before. It does still look nice in terms of the artwork, but not nearly as good as the dynamic scenes we've been getting in the past, and not nearly as interesting either. We open on Robotnik ambushing Sonic, hitting him with a laser and forcing him to drop all of his accumulated rings, while Robotnik attempts to crush him with his giant mech ball. Sonic manages to grab a couple more rings, but Robotnik, in a panic, realizes, thanks to his tabulation computers, that Sonic has just collected his 1 billionth ring. Remember the story we had a while ago where Sonic collected his 1 millionth and met the Ancient Walkers before they were really called the Ancient Walkers? Imagine that pointless story. Now imagine it being repeated, but with a lot more dialogue. That is what we have here. Sonic gets sent into an alternate dimension in which each of the Ancient Walkers congratulates him on being a hoarder, asking him riddles and offering him challenges as he works his way through a weird world made of rings. And while some of the visuals are very interesting, it's yet another example of a story that has no real purpose and amounts to nothing. Really, the only thing we got out of this story is the fact that Tails did apparently file some sort of report about his time in Down Under, so everyone's aware of the Ancient Walkers now. Sonic eventually gets yanked back into the real world by his billionth ring, shooting straight through Robotnik's Egomatic and causing him to crash. Sonic talks with Sally afterwards about how he feels inspired to try and find the origins of the Chaos Emeralds, the rings, and the Ancient Walkers, leading into a not-too-subtle advertisement for Sonic Quest, another special that we'll be looking at down the line, yippee skippy. But wouldn't it have been nice to get some of those details during this whole nonsense plot rather than having Sonic fall down a rabbit hole and do next to nothing for 12 pages, and instead explain every little thing that was happening in each panel? That's a part of the comic's early history that I really don't miss, and I thought we were finally starting to get past. Characters explaining, in overbearing detail, everything that is happening in that very panel. That's my job! Gallagher is credited as the only writer this time, which would explain the nonsense tone of the whole thing, but it really feels like he just did not have a solid idea for this issue, as it doesn't really serve as a proper prequel to the Sonic Quest storyline either, except for the end where we would have to be flat out told to look out for Sonic Quest. Manic and Kowalski are on art duty this time, and in an odd change-up, Manic seems to know that he was dealing with a very overblown humorous story, and made a definite effort to make Sonic as exaggerated as possible during this story. And he mostly succeeds with plenty of interesting facial expressions and looks to Sonic. And Kowalski's coloring is great as well, with plenty of interesting shading tricks, while Sonic is in this strange alternate dimension. Unfortunately, the artwork is the nicest thing about this story, and I have nothing more to say about it. I'm sure I'll have more to say about it when we actually get to Sonic Quest, but probably not given how this was handled. And now we move on to the most interesting of the 2 stories, the continuation of the Knuckles saga. I've been pretty harsh on these up till now, but finally, we actually get something interesting, something that actually has some weight and substance to it. Knuckles continues to talk about the time soon after the Echidnas lifted the island up off the ground. We follow a pair of scientists, Edmund and Dimitri, as they start taking readings off of the Chaos Emeralds. The two are attempting to find a way to gently lower the floating island back to the ground, as removing the Chaos Emeralds in any way could just cause it to drop like a stone. And because the emeralds are constantly letting off a steady stream of energy, there is almost no way to return the land back to the surface of the planet. Edmund and Dimitri, however, have invented an energy siphoning machine in hopes of gradually pulling energy from the emeralds over time, lowering the island back down. However, their idea is denied for being too dangerous and untested. Dimitri doesn't take this well, immediately stealing the device to test it on the emeralds despite his brother's protests. He ends up siphoning too much energy too fast, however, causing the machine to self-destruct and shattering all but one of the emeralds. Edmund and the magistrate are investigating when Dimitri himself, glowing green, saturated in chaos energy, and now mad with power, makes his presence known, and his intention to conquer the world and reshape it in his own image, using his power to cause the form of Mount Fate to appear from the ground. This story is actually really good, not nearly as lore-heavy as the last issue, allowing the characters to guide the story rather than the narration, and actually setting up some pretty interesting stakes for the next issue. Its main failing is, once again, its status as a backup story, as it doesn't really have the time necessary for proper character build-up. Dimitri suffers the most from this, as he's introduced in this story and his sudden shift into insanity feels very artificial as a result. He's just supposed to go evil and insane for the sake of the story because there was no real chance to establish his ambitions beyond the conversation he had with Edmund while they're monitoring the emeralds. And even then, the conversations make him out to be more interested in what else the emeralds' energies could be used for if they were able to pull it from them, rather than just harvesting it for the sake of attaining power. So, while there was that one misstep, this has finally managed to make all of the Knuckles stuff interesting again. It's not even that poorly drawn this time around. Still not terribly well done, but in terms of Ken's regular output, it's not nearly as lopsided as it usually is. While John D'Agostino handles inks in this story, there is no credit given for coloring. I bring that up because the colors are far more flat than they were in the first story, which had a lot of interesting shading techniques, but I will say that the effect used to convey Dimitri's transformation near the end is not only pretty creepy, but also a nice effect in general. Next time we'll be looking into issue 36, and boy, this one looks pretty damn cool. Wonder how many times I say that only to be disappointed. I'll see you all next time, everyone.